Ladies and gentlemen, greetings and hello. I recently did a little tutorial, a walkthrough of a build I made, and I had a lot of fun with it. I thought I'd keep that going with a strict introduction to Flux, everything that you need to get started. I'll try and be swift, but let's just talk through a little bit of stuff. ProtoFlux tooltip in your Resonite Essentials folder. Resonite Essentials Tools. Context menu, Browse Nodes. It pulls up this menu. Let me talk you through the common categories and what they are, what you're likely to use. Actions you will mostly use when you need to write or read from a basic value. That will likely be a data model store or often a value off of a component. That's for another time. That's just the actions category and when you'll most likely use it. We're going to skip down to audio. It has your play one shots. If you want to play an audio sound, you'll find that in the audio category, but interestingly, there's something else that's going to be more useful. We'll get to it. We're going to skip all the way down to flow next. This is where for is and if and your dynamic impulses, which are really powerful ways to trigger flux dynamically. And we're going to actually go into flow and I'm going to shoot out some of the common nodes here, how they operate. We'll do this super lightning fast. These are just what you'll likely run into. I'm going to show you dynamic impulse receiver first. This one has a data value. How this works is you give it a unique tag, so your program knows which code to execute. And when it receives the signal to execute something, this particular version has a little data piece. Green ones are integers. So this node will receive a request to execute. It will also receive a piece of data to execute using this data. And the flow line is just what happens next. It's only going to be useful if we also have a dynamic impulse trigger. This one is the tag, like we were just talking about. Which other piece of code would you like to execute? This one is slot hierarchy. So in your object, where is the code that you would like to execute? It knows where to look. And this bottom one is value. So when you execute the other bit of code, which piece of execution are you going to do? Where is the code that you desire to execute? And what data are you going to pass through? There's also dynamic impulses that do not have data. You can dynamically impulse off of buttons or other components. You will run into dynamic impulse a lot. And we're going to rapid fire these next ones, otherwise this video will be way too long. This is if you have a condition, true or false, execute the top or execute the bottom. For is a lot of fun. You're going to be pretty familiar with that, hopefully. How many times do you want to run the loop? Which iteration of the loop are you currently on? I'm doing these next ones together. Mostly you'll end up using this second one down here on loop iteration. Sometimes you want specific code to execute when you begin the loop, but a loop iteration and loop start both fire when you send the impulse initially. So when you just want the loop to do things, you'll almost always just use this second impulse. It's uncommon for you to have to do on loop begin because iteration also fires when the whole system begins. Then this last one is what happens when the loop is all the way done. You'll probably end up using that. Now I'm going to be unfair and confusing, and I'm going to show you something advanced that probably you will not be needing if you're watching this video. This is too advanced for you, but this is a teaser because it might come in handy later on. You will hear pretty frequently that ProtoFlux runs in one frame, just one execution. And sometimes if you're reading from variables, like in iterations from a for loop, if you write to a variable in one frame, then you need to give Resonite time to update before you can read the next variable. This is delay updates. It's an asynchronous operation, which is advanced for this video. I wanted to let you know that it exists. Don't worry about it, but sometimes in your ProtoFlux builds, if it's not working and you don't quite know why, interestingly enough, throwing in an update delay sometimes will fix your problems. And to make sure you know what that is, update, Resonite's going to run at like however many frames per second, and it has something like 1 million updates per frame. So updates are really small units of time, you might say. That's what that is. You won't need it, but you know it exists right now. And now we're going to give you a little bit of note of optimization. If you're watching this video, your power level is probably not strong enough to do something like fire while true, because we're going to go ahead and turn this on, and you're going to see all of these impulses. So now Resonite's doing so many operations for probably everyone, depending on how this value is set or not. If you can avoid constantly firing a signal if you don't need to, everyone in your instance will thank you for it. We're going to skip down next back to our categories to interaction. That mostly has things you eat, things you grab, and button events, which you will end up using. I'll show you button events real quick. You connect a button on the bottom. by dragging any of several button components. Grab the title of the component window and you'll drop it right down here to connect the button to this Flux node. And then you have options like when it's pressed, is it being held, or stuff like that. Little pro tip for UX design, it's really common for us as people to want to do on pressed run code, but really frequently actually doing on release feels a little bit more nice for the end user. It's not as intuitive to make things that work that way, but when you're using them, firing on release is sometimes a neat little tip. Sometimes it'll help things feel nice. And earlier when I mentioned audio, I also said there was another category that is under media that has more specific functions like pause, play, resume. If you want to do more fine controls with media, then media exists, not only audio. You won't use this one very frequently. Usually for most builds, play one shot is totally fine. But if you need more finesse, then these nodes are where they live under media. Up next is going to be operators, which is probably the most useful category and the one that's the hardest to get the hang of. That is where math goes. Add, subtract. It doesn't go under math. There's a math category. See, right up here, there's a math category. That's not where math is. That's where the fancy physicists go to use their math for game design. If you're not a fancy physicist, what you need for normal stuff is operators. Inside of operators, there's so many purple fields, which is when you have to choose a value. Conditional is extremely useful. We're going to go with that one. Often you'll be using value conditionals or values for pretty much all of the data that you're using. You would use object primarily for strings in your basic level builds. If you can't find strings, look under objects. Most of the time you want value. This pulls up a big list of all the different types of values in Resonite, and you'll have to choose one. And now this is that value conditional. A conditional node takes two inputs for a true or false value. This one is your Boolean field, is it true or false? And then this is your output. While we're here, we're going to get advanced for a second. If we go to object, we're going to have to type in string in order to find string. But there are so many other types of objects, there's like a million zillion of them. You're going to have to find out what they are. Usually you won't use those until your power level increases. And sometimes you have to get your capitalization the right way to find slot. It's capital S, stuff like that. Sometimes they get kind of strange, like iField text editor. If you end up using an iField text editor, question all of your life choices immediately. I know. I did that once. That's advanced stuff. Your power level is probably too low if you're watching this video. I just wanted to give you a taste of the really cool things you can do later on with ProtoFlux. We're going to go back to the operators category because this is where Boolean is. And these are your logic gates. They're all purple, which means you have to choose a value inside of it. These ones, you're almost always just going to do bool. You don't need bool for. I don't think anyone needs bool for. I think they just put it in just because. Just find bool. You have your and, you have your or, you have all sorts of nonsense. And logic gates are very powerful ways to get the program to do specific things. You'll use this a lot. That's under operators, Boolean. We'll brush past this next one, but also you will find packing inside of operators. That's how you take a float, which is 3 values, a float 3 for like position. You unpack that into 3 different values, change a value, and then repack it. Sometimes you'll have to do that, maybe not all of the time. Packing is where that is found. Up next, we're going to skip all the way down to strings. If you have to do string manipulation in ProtoFlux, try not to, or if you do have to, immediately go to anybody and complain about it, because everyone will be like, oh wow, string manipulations in Flux, wah 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 wah. It's one of the easiest ways to make friends, is to complain about string manipulations in Flux. There's so many options in here for you to play around with. We're just going to show you that one thing exists, which is parsing. And parsing is where you go to get a value, a number 1, a digit, and turn that into the character 1. It's usually not too common, you'll have to do that, but every now and then, if you need to know where that is where that is. That's under parsing. Transform is where you move things around, change their size and stuff like that. And variables I will show you, but I do not have time to explain right now. The variables you will mostly be working with are the dynamic variables. Dynamic variables read components which are on slots in your object. This is where the variable is located. This is what the variable name is. And this is the output value. And so long as we are talking about variables, I'm going to go back to the category actions like I mentioned at the beginning. I'm going to cover this one fast. We're going to go to write and choose your value. You're going to use this in two ways. Up first is a data model store. That's for if you make a value in the Flux and you want to recall that later on in the Flux. The quick way to make a data model store is to select the word variable, grab it, context menu, create data model store. This lets you write an input value to a data model store, then you have that output value to use somewhere else in your code. You might use this, you probably will, but that's not what you'll usually be writing to. Let's say you want to write a value's position. With your ProtoFlux tool equipped, grab the name of the value you want to change, context menu, source. Pull out a ribbon from the end of the source node you want to write to, and drop it into the null field in the variable. And those two are now linked, so you're going to get an input value and write the position of that particular object. I recognize that I just did things a little bit fast and a little bit backwards. That was the more advanced end of things, what nodes are, and now I'm going to real quick run through how to actually handle them. ProtoFlux can be fiddly. You have to aim exactly on the colored square when you're pulling out a ribbon or dropping a ribbon in. Sometimes if it feels like values are not connecting the right way, it could just be a skill issue and your aim is bad. I know, my aim is bad. In Resonate, you hear all the time, grab this, grab that. We have a grabby, it's on the grip on your controllers. People will say grab out a ribbon or a value or whatever, but when they mean that with Flux, it is primary input. When you have your Flux tooltip equipped, your laser is exactly on the colored square, and you press primary input, you pull out a ribbon. At this point, you can connect it to any matching node of color, or while you have your ribbon in your Flux tooltip, you can press secondary input, and that spawns out a little buddy, and that is where your input values are, or you can see what the output is expected as well. And that's how you can check input 0, output 0. A ribbon will only accept one value at a time. You'll notice it changes. An output can go to more than one place. Your node might look something like this. Pretty frequently, you'll want to debug and be like, hang on, what value is this actually reading from? You pull out real quick a separate display. That's something you will do frequently. Flow nodes connect together with an in and out, on release, if, some value, and then you can do one or the other. You can pull out those just like we did before so you can see if there's any calls or not. And one thing that's very useful, you can also spawn out manual calls, the same way as we pulled out all of the other little doohickeys. And so you can call something manually and see what your code is doing at any given point. You will do that a lot. And if you'll remember, a while ago I told you not to do string manipulations in Flux. This is why. This is an example of a real-life build that I did just recently. I'm going to show you relays. We're going to zoom in right here. And you can see all this weird little red spaghetti right now. Anytime you see one of these little ribbon boyos, those are not actually strictly necessary. That's a way to grab and draw the code around. A lot of people use relays just to help code be more readable. This is what it looks like if I delete those relays. Still works, it's just not as tidy. However, relays are actually important. If I have one value that needs to go to multiple places, you can actually grab with your controller grippies onto any ribbon. That will give you a relay to shape how things go. From a relay, you can pull out many different ribbons. And that's how you get one value to go to multiple places. If you don't want to drag from a node itself, then you can grab a relay, and that has one additional use. This is one relay which is feeding to many different places. If I'm in my build and I suspect the value I'm working with might change, using a relay I can route from one or to the other, and it'll change each time I do that. But that is a good way to handle multiple ways of routing your code. If everything feeds out of one relay, it makes it very easy to change out your sources if ever that needs to happen. Otherwise, you would have to get your new source and drag every line every time. Usually that's not a big deal, but sometimes using a relay in instances like that can help. And as a final point of order, you are going to have to store your Flux somewhere. Up first, you're going to want to have a slot ready where you want to store all of your Flux. Calling it Flux is good practice. With your ProtoFlux tool equipped, point at any of your spaghetti, hold in your secondary input that highlights all of your spaghetti. While all of your spaghetti is held, and your ProtoFlux tip is still equipped, grab the name of your slot where your Flux is going to go, context menu, pack into. You will notice all of the spaghetti goes away, and all of it is now living inside of your slot. In case you are emotionally attached to your spaghetti and you want it back, use your ProtoFlux tooltip, grab the name of the slot that has all of the Flux in it, context menu, Unpack. And there, the spaghetti comes back. Sometimes if your Flux isn't working the right way, you have to pack and then unpack the Flux. That's an uncommon problem, but every now and then that does help. And always make sure to save your work when you're done. I know this was a really swift guide. I went pretty fast. I could not get to everything. I left a lot of explanations out. I just did the best that I could. If you want to get started in ProtoFlux, that is the very basics. Hope it was helpful, and I hope to see you around.